Hello, and welcome to the Romancing in Paris podcast. I'm your host, Heise. In this podcast, we'll be traveling around the city as I pick out my top romantic spots per arrondissement. You don't have to visit these places only as a couple. Exploring them can be the expression of your own love of Paris. Are you ready to get romancing in Paris? In this episode, we remain on the left bank to continue our romantic explorations of Paris as we journey to the elegant 7th arrondissement. Once predominantly fields and farmland belonging to the Saint-Germain Abbey, as covered in the previous episode, in the 17th and 18th centuries, the area grew as an aristocratic neighborhood populated with opulent mansions. After the French Revolution, most of these were confiscated and eventually converted into government ministries and embassies. Due to the bureaucratic use of a great quantity of the buildings of the Eastern 7th District, parts of the arrondissement are virtually ghost towns in the evenings and on weekends. That said, there are a few livelier pockets in the neighborhood. The dominant tranquility of this district is actually in perfect harmony with the place we'll be visiting in this episode, which is a wonderfully peaceful haven, a secret garden, one which isn't romantic only thanks to its setting. It also has a very romantic story to tell. Grab your sherry. We're going to the Square Roger Stéphane. As I mentioned just now, the 7th has a couple of vibrant areas, and one of these revolves around Le Bon Marché department store. The Rue du Four, the Rue de Sèvres, and the Rue de Bac are abuzz with shops and local life. Presiding over this is the oh-so-chic Hotel Lutetia. Despite its current bustle, this section of the neighborhood, too, used to be calm. Very calm indeed. And there's a small relic of this left, the hidden Square Roger Stéphane. Now, the term square can be a little misleading in French, as it doesn't really refer to what we would call a square in English. That is, a large open public space, usually square or rectangular in size and surrounded by buildings. Instead, for this sort of public space, the French used the word place, which we talked about in the previous episode, and the word square for garden or courtyard, which is often closed in by buildings or some form of walls. The best thing about the Square Roger Stéphane is that, standing on the busy intersection of Rue de Four and Boulevard Raspail, one would never know it was there. Thousands of people walk by it every day without having the slightest clue of its existence. It's so hidden that I had considered covering it in my other podcast, Paris Cachée. But the overall ambiance and the history of this secret garden fits better in with the theme of romance. Next to the aforementioned intersection is a pedestrian cul-de-sac, the Rue Recamier. The lane's name gives an allusion to the person of significance we'll be discussing in this episode, Juliette Recamier, one of the most famous women in France of the turn of the 19th century. We'll learn more about Juliette in due course. The lane itself dates back to 1907, built on the location of a site I will be telling you more about. The street is charming, but it's what's at the end that is our romantic attraction, our secret garden, the only remnants of the property of the Abbé Aubois convent. You see, in addition to aristocratic homes, a number of convents, with noble patronage, were also built in the area. The Abbé au Bois convent was originally built in the early 1200s, north of Paris in the Oise department. This became a troublesome location shortly thereafter with the commencement of the 100 Years' War between the French and the English, as the convent was caught in the middle of this. Therefore, it was forced to move to escape the turmoil, and, after having a few other locations, it was eventually re-established here, at this location, in Paris, in 1654, thanks to the royal patronage of Queen Anne of Austria, Louis XIV's mother. As more and more aristocratic families moved into the surrounding area, the convent took on the role of educating the daughters of the neighboring nobles. During the early days of the Revolution, and like other religious buildings and property, the convent was closed down and requisitioned by the state. Used as a prison during the period of the Revolution known as the Terror, from 1793 to 94, this was when the guillotine was the most active. After things had calmed down, the buildings returned to being a convent. To help with the complex's finances, the nuns rented out some apartments to high society ladies. It was here where Juliette Récamier lived for 30 years. Ah, la belle Juliette! Born into an aristocratic family in Lyon in 1777, Juliette spent many years of her childhood boarding at a convent there, while her parents had moved to Paris for business. She joined them in 1787, just before the outbreak of the Revolution, right in the thick of the Terror. At age 15, she was married to a friend of the family, Jacques Rose Récamier, 25 years her senior. A rich banker, also from Lyon, it is assumed that their relationship was more platonic than romantic, and had been arranged in order to protect Juliette and provide her with financial stability in case her parents were sent off to the guillotine. They were all fortunately spared the blade, and when the darkest days of the Revolution were behind them, at the end of the 1790s, the young and dazzling Juliette began holding a salon at their mansion near where the opera is today. Thanks to her beauty and charm, she quickly rose in society ranks. She, along with Thérèse Tallien and Joséphine de Beauharnais, Napoleon Bonaparte's first wife, became known as les Trois Grâces, the Three Graces. She was one of the era's leading fashion and design icons, being one of the first to follow the Greek Revival style. She was so famed that the most important artists of the times immortalized her in their paintings, including Jacques-Louis David, whose portrait of her now hangs at the Louvre. In the painting, we see Juliette seated on a double sofa without a back, a piece of furniture which became known simply as a récamier in Juliette's honor. The background of the painting is very simply done. It didn't need to be elaborate. Juliette's beauty was enough to make the painting a masterpiece. Her beauty wasn't noticed only by artists. She had an abundance of admirers. Whether or not they were also her lovers is another question. Nevertheless, it is certain that she had one lover, or rather great love, and their amour is linked to our square. I'll be telling you more about this shortly.
We'll be right back with Romancing in Paris after a word from our sponsors. And now back to Romancing in Paris.
Juliette's glorious days as one of the three Graces declined with the rise of Napoleon. Her criticism of his regime led Juliette's salons to be banned by the emperor and had her sent into exile from Paris on several occasions. She returned to the capital after the fall of Napoleon in 1814. It was after her husband's business took a nosedive in 1819 that Juliette ended up moving into the Abbé aux Bois convent, where she stayed for the next 30 years. At first, she lived in a small 2-room apartment, but she managed to move to a larger one in 1829. During the first decade or so of living at the convent, Juliette held what became one of the most important literary salons in all of Europe. The salon helped bolster the fame of a number of young writers, including Honoré de Balzac. And it was presided over by influential writer and politician François-René de Chateaubriand. Ah, Chateaubriand! It was not by chance that he led Juliette's salon. Apparently, Chateaubriand considered himself as the greatest lover, the greatest writer, and the greatest philosopher of his age. Well, 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 modesty was not on the list of his many attributes. 10 years Juliette's senior, Chateaubriand came from a noble family of Brittany, and his sister had arranged for him to marry the daughter of a fellow wealthy Breton family, a woman he had never even met before, and to whom he did not remain faithful. He is known to have had many lovers over the course of his life, but the one for which he held the strongest affection and had for the longest time was Juliette. Although they'd originally met at the salon of Madame de Staël in 1801, it wasn't until they saw each other again in 1817 that a liaison between them commenced, the full extent of which was revealed after their deaths via their extensive and passionate correspondence. It was in these love letters to Juliette that Chateaubriand wrote things like, "I will finally see you today. It seems like centuries since I've told you I love you, and that all my happiness is in your hands. And I love you with all my soul. I am yours for life." Oh la la, Chateaubriand! Although he wasn't completely faithful to Juliette, and perhaps she wasn't also to him, they remained extremely close for the next 30 years. Chateaubriand became the French ambassador to various countries. Their letters flourished, and Juliette even went to visit him when he was posted in Rome. Back in Paris, in 1838, Chateaubriand moved to a private mansion on Rue du Bac to be closer to Juliette. In his last years, he virtually only left the house to go visit his chérie, who had then too mostly retreated from society life. They would spend hours sitting together in the convent's garden, the predecessor of our romantic Square Roger Stéphane, originally named after Juliette, like the lane which takes you to it. Chateaubriand died in Paris in 1848, in Juliette's arms, true to his words. He was hers for life. She didn't live much longer herself, passing away the next year. Entering the garden, a sloping path immerses you in its lush greenery. As you meander along its narrow paths, bordered by weeping willows, magnolias, shoots of bamboo, and seasonal flowers, you'll encounter a gurgling waterfall and a small rise at the top of which is the perfect lover's bench. You can take a break here to enjoy a quiet moment with your own chérie, just like Juliette and Chateaubriand would have done over 150 years ago. Before you come to the park, why not pick up some gourmet treats around the corner at the chic food shop of Le Bon Marché department store, or go a tiny bit further to Rue du Bac, which is lined with fabulous pastry and chocolate shops, including Chapon, Des Pains et des Idées, or a branch of Pierre Hermé in the historic passageway Beau Passage. While on Rue du Bac, look out for number 120, which is where Chateaubriand lived. You could also end your visit with a cocktail across the street at the Hotel Lutecha's glamorous bar, or with a dinner of soufflés at the Récamier restaurant, found back on the pedestrian lane. If you'd like to pay homage to Juliette, you can see the paintings of her hanging at the Louvre or the Musée Carnavalet. You can also track down her final resting place at her family's tomb in the cemetery of Montmartre. Thank you for listening to this latest edition of Romancing in Paris. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe. That way you won't miss the next one. Ratings or reviews are also très aimés. Much loved. If you would like to discover more romantic places in the 7th District, see my website jetammeneither.com. Here you will find my ultimate guides to the top romantic spots per arrondissement of Paris. This podcast was produced by Paris Underground Radio. Check out their website if you're interested in listening to more great podcasts on Paris, including my other podcast, Paris Cachée, which explores even more lesser-known and hidden places in Paris. Until next time, happy romancing in Paris.